Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for June 15th, 2021. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is a webcast and podcast where we dig deep into the clutter that stands between people and the lives they want to be living. We aim to make sense of where so much stuff comes from in the first place, and we offer strategies to slow down the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we choose to keep. We rely heavily on the questions and topic suggestions we get from you, our viewers and listeners.
If you're joining us in the Zoom meeting for the first time, you can share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle gets to them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature if you want to let us know that you would be willing to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. We're streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can also share questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. And during the live webcast every Tuesday, you can call us at 669-900-6833. Use meeting ID 993-419-863 and password clutter to join the meeting. Okay, we're going to start, as we usually do, by following up on last week's tittle, which was called Up Against the Wall. The assignment was to identify the wall or section of a wall in your home that has the most stuff on it, or one that was decorated a while ago, or one that just doesn't look quite right to you. Then take a fresh look at what's displayed there with a view toward whether the decor fits your current tastes and sense of style. We want to hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook. Who tore down a wall this week? Please let us know. Lauren H. on YouTube shared this comment. Painting the house last year was a great motivator to pare down wall art. Walls are mostly blank now, and what is up truly speaks to me. Art that didn't make the cut was a valued part of my past, but didn't fit into my present or future.
Walls are definitely a place where we often add without editing. We just keep putting more up. Painting the wall means a fresh start and the ability to start over, editing the collection, deciding what works. And so I'm really glad you're happy with the result. I'm sure it looks beautiful.
The part of Lauren's comment that really resonated for me was, what is up truly speaks to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not just somebody gave it to me or I've had it forever. It's still, it speaks to me now, which right. I think is that's a good characteristic.
It's not left over from 4 apartments ago.
Yeah. 4 trends ago.
That too, yeah.
Also, following up on last week's topic of letting go of decorative items and specifically holiday decor, we had a great suggestion from a YouTube viewer who goes by the name of the Feld Hamster. I love that name.
That must be a story, right?
Right. If you can, decide what decorations you want to let go at the beginning of the season. That way someone will actually want it. If you wait until after the holiday, for example, Christmas, nobody will want any Christmas decor, not even for free, and it ends up in a landfill. If instead you let it go in November, you might make someone really happy who might not have been able to afford it, or someone who would have spent the money so as not to disappoint the kids and then gotten into trouble paying the bills. Isn't that a great suggestion?
That's a great suggestion. And it's the, decor equivalent of, you don't give away winter clothes at the end of winter and you don't give away summer clothes at the end of summer if you want to have them be used. So trying to filter them in advance of the season or saving the winter clothes that you're letting go of until the next winter, it makes it more likely that they'll be captured and used. Yeah, thank you for the advice. It was a great point to be making.
Deborah said, Feld Hamster. I have seen them around my local tennis courts. Catherine reports she sent a few items on her wall that were handmade to the next generation grandchild, hand painted pictures.
Cool.
Samudra said, my walls have 17 windows. The rest have mirrors. No room for much else.
Oh, well, that's a sort of baked in preventative then.
Yeah, that kept us from decorating much in our last apartment. We had 13 windows or something like that on, all the outside walls of the apartment were windows, which meant a lot of nice views and light, but not a whole lot of places for art. JC said, I rearranged my office space and changed the wall behind the desk. Now I have a smaller desktop, which leaves me more space to move around in this space.
Excellent.
And I
Good
can
job,
now
JC.
better see the pictures I have posted of the people I love and think of them often.
That's nice. That's very nice. And it's clearly that's the space you've been using all along, but if you've taken the time to refresh it, now it works better for you. And that's awesome. Good job.
And Linda said, I only managed to clear off one small area of a wall in my living room. It does look much better. Hey, that was all we asked. We said
Right?
one place, one section of a wall is plenty. Boy, if you do that, if you just do that one little assignment every week, the constant progress adds up.
It does. That's great. No need to dismiss that, because ultimately, if you just took 10% out and you think it looks that much clearer and lighter to you, then you're already benefiting from the change. And so that's the whole goal, is to make sure that it's at a level that you find pleasing and appropriate. And so if you got there already, awesome.
And Joyce said, I have the opposite problem. I took down my wall art, including family photos, before I had my windows replaced. Now they're all in baskets, boxes, my linen closet. I cannot decide which ones to put up or where.
Time to start over, right? And that process is probably one where, like when you first move in and you have to have hang everything off for the first time, it's like, oh my God, it's going to take forever. I would, again, break the decorating down into chunks. Don't try to do it all in one sitting. And, pick a wall in the bedroom, pick a wall in the living room, and say, okay, the kind of stuff I want here is, I want this to be a soothing wall. I want this to be a wall with pictures in it. I want, give yourself some idea. Think about how you want the wall to reflect back at you, and then go hunting amongst your stuff for things that will suit that area. And just hang those 3 or 4 pictures, those 3 or 4 pieces, and be done for the day. And you can make your way around the house, one little decorative area at a time. And it allows you to also contemplate how many of the places you want to cover. And so the goal doesn't have to be get all this stuff back up on the wall. The goal can be, I now have bare walls, and let me think through what I want this wall to do, what I want to be happening here, what kind of theme does that need to have, that kind of stuff. Do I want one piece or many pieces here? Do I need something big or small? And you can sort of carefully think through what each individual space needs in terms of art, and then just go think of your baskets and boxes of artwork and photos as the store that you're going to shop at, and go pluck things out that work. And ultimately, you may decide that they don't all need to go back on the wall because you've covered them sufficiently and you've thought your way around the house and figured out how you want each one of them to look, and you've got leftovers. Well, that's fine. Then you can have leftovers, and you can decide, okay, do I need to keep these? Do I need to donate these? Are these family photos and I don't like the frame anymore? Am I taking it apart? So you can end up with a surplus at the end, and then that could be another project of, okay, now how do I process and deal with these that didn't make the cut?
Yeah. I have another suggestion, which is, if you have a trusted friend or family member whose taste you really like, get them involved in the process. Make it a social affair. When we moved into the house, the new house, we had all of our stuff that we never put up in the old apartment, and we sort of put art in the rooms we thought it might go in, generally.
Yeah,
and just
Beth come and work.
And then Beth and Rich came over, and Beth is an artist with a really great eye, and she's also a theater person, so she has a lot of sense of designing space.
Decoration.
Yeah, she does. She's done a ton of set design, and so she helped where Jaime and I had nothing to go on, when it was just, well, I like this, but I don't know what to do with it. And so we made it, we all ate dinner, and then just wandered around the house. And then Rich, my brother-in-law, is the one with the practical skills.
Yeah, right.
He can wire up the
Handyman.
he can put in the wall anchors and wire up the things that don't have picture wire on them yet. So
Right.
Judith commented, every time I walked by my bulletin board and whiteboard in the kitchen, I felt really sad. 13 years ago, I bought a gift certificate for scuba diving lessons for my autistic stepson. He never used it. So we contacted the owner of the shop and he gave me the money I invested back, $150. I cleaned off the bulletin board and repurposed the area for my own genealogical research. I have a photo of myself at age 8 with my mother, grandmother, and great grandmother. Now I feel love when I see that area.
That is so great. I'm so proud of you for reclaiming that space, and how fabulous that you went back to the scuba shop and said, yeah, that was a failed thing. It didn't work. Not everybody would have been able to get the money back. So I'm super thrilled for you that you got a little spending money to work on your area for the effort. And how fabulous to recognize that walking by that space made you sad. Like, some people wouldn't quite notice that they feel icky when they go by something. And so good on you for noticing and then altering it so that it no longer is creating a negative space for you in the house. That's fabulous. Yay. We get lots of clapping for that one. That was excellent.
Well, and there are a lot more reports on wall progress this week.
Cool.
Dawn talked about, doesn't have much on the walls, but is putting up floating shelves and rotating what she has on them. And then Lorraine reported taking down an old TV they don't use anymore.
Awesome. I think that happens a lot. There's a lot of, oh, we put this TV up in this corner and nobody ever sits in this room, and why is it here? Good job. Good job, Lorraine. Excellent.
And Samudra said, I did take the string of green lights off the silhouette tree in the corner because those lights were never the ones I was looking for anyway. Perfect. That's exactly in the spirit of the tittle. It was, look at it, look at the stuff with a fresh eye. I bought this. I never really liked it.
Right. It was a good, I had a moment of weakness and thought maybe I'd try it and whatever. So there you go.
Okay, we should probably get on to the main topic.
Okay.
So in recent months, we've had a lot of requests to return for a deep dive into the craft room. So that's where we're headed next. The creative impulse is an essential human need to enrich and beautify our world by the work of our own hands. It's rewarding and fun, but clutter erodes the space, free time, and mental clarity we need for creative pursuits. Today, Gayle is going to explain to us a few key principles for organizing your art room, craft room, dedicated workspace, or shared space you use for creative projects. And she'll offer organizing tips to keep your creativity flowing.
I'm starting today's topic with an old story about one of my very first clients. She's since passed away, but she was a fabulous jewelry artist, and she used the garage of her townhome as her jewelry studio. Now, like every artist ever, her garage studio was stuffed to the gills with materials, and she was finding it hard to use the space because it had gotten so packed and she was overwhelmed. She hired me to get control of it for her so she could get back to creating. We started off with her work surface because that's usually even though the room is packed, there's an artist will still have a work surface that they're trying to work on, even if they're struggling. And I was pulling items off the table, identifying them, asking her about how she uses them, etc. And I picked up this small jewelry box, which of course I immediately opened. And inside was a fat little round bee. Deceased, actually, little round bee. I thought, oh, this must be trash, but I need to ask to confirm. And so I turned to her and said, can I throw away the dead bee? And my client whipped her head around and said, no, you cannot throw out the bee. I found her on the sidewalk. Isn't she beautiful? So lovely. She is perfect and I want to keep her. As you can tell, she was very, very French. I must have looked shocked at her response because she went on to tell me all the cool things the bee could be a part of. And I quickly backed off, realizing that I needed to start looking for a place to store the bee box. And I had just learned my very first lesson about working with artists. They can justify anything. It doesn't matter what it is, what it costs, where it came from, how old it is, how much of it they already have, or what a non-artist would say about it. Artists can justify anything. It's one of the blessings of having a creative mind, the ability to easily see so many possibilities. Trash or treasure, it can all become part of an art project. And that meant I had to store a dead bee for some future creation. Just a caveat here, in case you don't think of yourself as a craft person, all you collectors out there can see yourself in these descriptions too. Collectors have the same passion that artists do about certain categories of stuff. When I'm talking about craft, just remember the same motivations apply to collectors, and you'll see yourself in what I'm saying, I'm sure. Collectors are driven by the same need to collect stuff, to justify buying stuff, by the possibilities of the stuff, by the desire to share stuff with others that artists have. So I'm really talking to both types of people today. As an organizer, I have the ability to organize any studio based on 4 basic categories of stuff. I've talked about this in greater detail on our video called Organizing Your Craft Space for Creative Inspiration. But let's recap the ideas quickly here. You can start with organizing your studio with the main supply. So whatever your art form is, there's a main supply, and it's always the largest part of your art stash. Painters have paint, knitters have yarn, beaders have beads, glass blowers have glass. You're always working with one main supply. Then next category in an art studio is embellishment supplies. Of course, no artist is content with just one material, so there's always a stash of embellishment supplies, things that get added to the work on top of the main supply. For painters or knitters, beads might be an embellishment, but for a beader, yarn or paint might be the embellishments. Every art studio has tools. All art has the tools of the trade, what you use to make it happen, whether it's something as simple as a needle and thread, or like glass blowers have a million big metal tools that are part of grabbing and manipulating glass. And then the last category that is in all art studios is the reference material. They all have reference books, photos, and instructional documents that they use for ideas, inspiration, and technical guidance. So whatever craft you're into, you can break the room and the systems you need to organize the room into these 4 categories. As any artist or collector who has started this process, the longer you've been into your passion, the bigger and more overwhelming this process will be. And artists and collectors have some Achilles heels that make the organizing process difficult for them. As we've said, here's the first Achilles heel. They can justify keeping anything. It all has potentials, or for collectors, potential value. This makes the usual filter questions that I would normally use with people, like, are you using it and do you like it, fail as filters for artists. Of course you're going to use it someday. Of course you like it. I have one client who, when I show them the item and say, what about this? Their immediate response is, isn't that fabulous? Isn't that so great? I know, but that's not the question. The question is, are we keeping it or not? So for artists and collectors, it's all fabulous and you love it all. So that's not a good filter question for you. The second Achilles heel is when we start a new passion, we never realize how big the collection will become. We really never plan for the studio that we grow into over the years. That means we never actually plan out the studio and how it should be set up. Collectors never really plan it all for all that they want to display. So as a collector gets a bigger and bigger collection, they get more and more they want to display. And they also cobble together display options slowly over time. So it's a hassle for anybody with passion for some kind of stuff. The next Achilles heel is that artists have a hard time releasing materials that they will no longer use. What we learned with is usually grown out of. what we collect in the beginning gets overshadowed as we learn and get better at our area of expertise. So keeping these things becomes unnecessary clutter in the studio, but artists never circle back and pass these materials on as they grow and learn. The last Achilles heel is artists do not like to admit that they can't realize all the possibilities they can imagine with their creative brain. They have a new brilliant idea and they add it to the huge pile of brilliant ideas, and they never stop to realize they cannot ever realize all of those ideas. The idea pile becomes a tower of forgotten possibilities. This is also the idea of aspirational clutter. You aspire to be able to do all of these objects. This is a process that I want to learn in the future. This is an area that we want to cover. I want to grow in this area. I want to be able to someday take on this craft or add in this, set of techniques or skills. And maybe you're not ever actually going to get there. Maybe you're not going to have time to learn a whole new craft or add in all the skills that you can imagine that you might want to be interested in.
We've talked before about cooking as craft.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is my favorite nowadays form of creative expression. And I mean, it really it follows everything you've described. There are primary materials. There's the main supply, which is in the refrigerator.
Right.
And then there are the embellishment supplies that are tucked away in the spice cabinet or in the
pantry,
the cabinet of oils and vinegars and the pantry. And then, of course, the tools, always the tools. And I'm as prone to the aspirational clutter there as any crafter, because, you see a recipe and then you're in the store and you see the jar of, I don't know, what's the crazy, I can't think of what it's called, but there's a Moroccan spice, that I just had to have, which of course I've never gotten into. Totally aspirational. Connie says, I have my craft supplies in 6 big plastic bins, reduced from 8. And I tend to use our living room coffee table to work on crafts while watching TV. So I have to clean up after myself every time company is due.
That's helpful.
Yes, or
you stop having company so you don't have to clean the craft supplies.
Well, she says last year during lockdowns, it hardly got cleaned. Or you could build that cleanup time into the crafting time, is what I was going to say.
Yeah. So I do have some alterations to offer for these Achilles heels, these places where artists find it more difficult to go back and organize their space and make it be useful. So I wanted to throw those out here too. As we were talking about, artists can justify anything and the usual filter questions don't work. I can't just say, do you like it or are you using it? Because the answer is always going to be yes and of course. And so instead of asking, do you like it? I would ask, do you see yourself picking this as a project over all the other options, or will it always get passed over for something more interesting? So I'm implying the idea that you have to decide, by default, we know that you like it. The question is, would you pick it? Would you pick it as a project, or would it fall to the wayside, overshadowed by other things? The next Achilles heel about not planning for the studio, I think we have to we piecemeal it over time. We piecemeal our studio together over time, or our display spaces for collectors. And instead, you can stop at any point in time before you start organizing your studio and consider a master plan for all you want to keep and display and work on. So before you dig in and start tearing your studio apart, look at the room that you have and ask yourself, what would you like to be able to do there? And how would, if you were starting to plan a studio now, let's say if you were going to move out of your house tomorrow and move into a completely empty room, how would you plan the space now, given all that you know about your craft skills, your habits, how you work, what kind of surfaces you need, how you use the tools. You have so much more information now about how you execute or how you collect and display than you did when you started. And so using your more expert eye now to evaluate the room and plan a space will help you as you go to filter out the room and decide what's going to stay and what's going to go, because you are going to tear it all apart and start from scratch. And so, of course, that makes a big mess, but by definition, it's already a big mess. You're just going to make a different big mess for a little while you contemplate how you can rearrange the whole thing to make it work better for you. Spending that time is a lot of downtime for somebody that likes to be an artist and be working all the time. But it's so worth the effort to let your studio design and layout evolve and catch up to your level of expertise and what you know now and how you work now. Let that room grow to support you, and stopping the organizing process to make a plan about how that room should be laid out first will help you as you go to filter things. So one Achilles heel, the third Achilles heel was it's hard to release materials you don't use anymore. This is something that you have to think of as just like the clothes that you wore when you were a kid. The materials don't work for your level of expertise now. So releasing materials that you have grown past puts those materials out in the world for people who are newly learning to pick up, and it gets them out of your way because you are giving up valuable space in your studio to materials that you would never use anymore, that they're not good enough for the expert that you have become. And so recognizing that you are more educated than you used to be and you're more skilled than you used to be, and those things that you started with aren't worthy of where you're sitting right now. So time to let them go find them, go dig them out. They're probably in the farthest reaches, in the tightest little hidey holes. They're in the very back of your studio somewhere, and they will create a vast cavern of open space by the time you get rid of them, pull them all out.
Cynthia on Facebook said, there's no such thing as too much watercolor. Always want to try the latest new palette, and I won't live long enough to use all that paint.
That was a perfect transition to the last Achilles heel, which is artists don't like to admit they can't realize all the possibilities, right? They're never going to convert all those ideas into art. And so the skill that artists and collectors have to learn is to prioritize and rate their collections based on their passion about it. So by definition, you are being an artist in this art, or you are collecting this object because you have a passion about it. And so learning to grade your contents based on your passion will allow you to filter and prioritize the stuff. So your responses are going to range from that's cool to this is freaking awesome. You're always going to be able to pick your next project from the freaking awesome collection, and the just cool stuff never comes to the top of the list. Especially because your stack is not finite. It's not like you're going to collect for a while and then stop and just turn those ideas into art. You're always adding things to the list. Like we said, there's always another bright idea. There's always another big inspiration. There's always another thought about something creative to do. And so the collection, the idea pile gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so recognizing that some of those are just going to be an idea that swings by your head and goes out the other side and never actually becomes something you realize is an important way to prioritize. So every artist understands the idea of they look at something and go, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. This is my favorite thing. This is coolest ever. And you have a really huge response. And then there's some where they pick it up and go, oh, I could do something with that. That would be. The lesser response is never going to capture your attention enough to make it happen, because the ones that make you clench your teeth and get all excited, those are the ones that are going to come to the top of the list. So recognizing that your passionate response to your area is always going to be on a spectrum of light interest to overwhelming desire And you're always going to work on the edge of the spectrum that is around the overwhelming desire. And these ones where your response is lesser, they're never going to come to the top of the list. So you can acknowledge that they were interesting for a minute, and then you can pass them on to some other artist for whom this object goes on their awesome stack instead of on their that's cool pile. That way you don't have to maintain all of your possibilities, and you can, it's sort of like, this is the version of pulling the cream of the crop for the artist. For the collector, the ones that make you super excited about them, really rev up, that's the cream of the crop for you. And working in that stuff and letting the lesser stuff catch your attention, go, that's cool, but I'm never going to do that one, and pass it on. Like, I'm never going to get more excited about this, and sending it on to the next person, is a way that you can filter your contents. By definition, it went in the room because there was some moment in your studio where you thought that would be cool, or it caught your attention, or caught your eye, and it went into the studio and hit the back wall, and has never come back out again because it wasn't exciting enough. It wasn't inspiring enough to grab you and keep going. And so as you dig into your room with a new master plan, filtering the stuff, I would absolutely love to do this. This is just interesting. Gives you a way to draw a line and say, okay, the just interesting stuff has to go out and become somebody else's, some other artist's project. And the same with the collection version of that is, I sort it, and I've got 3 of the same thing. And if I want this to fit into this room and I want to display that, then I need to pick the best one of the 3 and let the other 2 go off for somebody else to collect.
Abby said, I try to ask myself, when will I do this? If not within the next year, I'm trying to say, time to let it go to become someone else's vision.
Right?
That's a great algorithm,
right?
especially because, a lot of materials are time limited. Lee says, thinking of working on one project at a time and purchase the material when needed and not storing. I saved special paper for watercolor, and now it has degraded and discolored.
And that's true. The paints dry up, and the glue gets hard, and the the plastic deteriorates. Nothing is infinite. There are some things that survive over time, like the bead doesn't, the glass bead doesn't fall apart, but then there's some other stuff that does. And so there is some time limit on some of the materials that you're going to use. And just like the clothes hanging in the closet are deteriorating for 20 years and the elastic's dying and whatever's happening to it, passing it on after it's fallen apart doesn't do anybody any good. Passing it on now while it's still useful, it means that your interest in having it be used can be passed on to somebody who wants to deal with it right now. And it's worth the effort to get it out of your studio and make it a better place for you to work on the stuff that you find super energizing. We know that everybody loves everything that they see. All artists get super attached to stuff that grabs their attention, but the truth is everything grabs your attention, and you still got to come up with a way to filter. And so for you, it's just where on the passion spectrum you fall. If you're super excited about it, it's one thing. If you're only, vaguely interested or find it, a moment of pause when you look at it, that's kind of cool. Somebody could use those. If you're saying to yourself, somebody could use those, then that's not enough passion. It hasn't generated enough of your interest, and it needs to go on to somebody who is immediately going to go, I needed that. I love that. That's the thing that I need right now.
I have a couple more comments and questions I want to get to, but first, okay. I want to remind our viewers and listeners that we have a YouTube channel with more than 150 videos on lots and lots of organizing topics. Visit cfhou.com/YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and then click the bell icon next to the subscribe button if you'd like to get notifications when we post new content. I also want to say a special thank you to Corinne for becoming our newest Patreon supporter. If you'd like to help support our efforts with a recurring monthly donation of any size, please visit cfhou.com/Patreon, Patreon. Your contributions help us offset the cost of producing the weekly webcast and will also help us fund new projects that we have in the works. Thank you for your generosity, Corinne, and all of our patrons.
Thank you, Corinne.
Okay, question from Lori on Facebook.
Okay.
What do you do when supplies can be used and are necessary for two crafts you are passionate about? And for example, scrapbooking and card making paper, stamps, etc.
So if you're into paper crafts, then it's sort of like being a mixed media artist, right? My client that had saved the bee, she was a mixed media person as well. And so she did a lot of assemblage work. And hence the bee. Like the bee was not going to survive on a piece of jewelry. It was going to end up in an assemblage piece. And so what you described to me was two paper related crafts, right? Like, so still your main supply is paper, and you're going to source that paper for each of the things that you described. And all of the other stuff is embellishment. And if you actually are one of those multi-crafter people, they exist, of course, and you have a passion about more than one, then I would lay out the room in a couple of zones. When you're master planning the studio where you're going to do more than one craft, then you have to decide which crafts need a workspace that is separate from each other. And so like I wouldn't, if I was into painting and beading, then I would not want to be doing painting in the same place I was doing beading. So tools are different, disaster in the making to get paint all over the beads. So you'd want to set up separate stations for them. And if the crafts are shared, I mean, if the supplies are shared between the two, awesome. And if you do two very different crafts, then you're going to have a main supply for each one and embellishment supplies for each one. And maybe you'll be lucky and the embellishment supplies work for both of them. Or maybe you're going to have duplicate systems for each piece. So you just have to consider in your situation, paper-based crafts. So the main supply for each is the same and the tools are probably the same, glue, stamps, all the little metal tools that you use, scissors, all that kind of stuff. The tools are the same. And so you can have two different workstations if you want, but the categories of supplies and the four categories in main supply, embellishment, tools, and reference materials will be similar enough that you can keep them all together. If the crafts are really different, then you probably need to have duplicate versions of each of those to support the workstation that you create. Does that help?
We got a couple of suggestions for Connie, who talked about using her living room coffee table. Deborah suggested a tray, which you could arrange.
Oh yeah, to
what
work
you're working on a tray that could be moved out of the way. And Rowan suggested maybe a rolling craft table that could be moved out of the way.
Oh, instead of the coffee table?
Right.
Good point. You could create a table that is at least small enough but rolling so that you could roll it into a closet without disturbing anything. And you could also, if you really actually use the space in front of the coffee table, in front of the couch as a workspace instead of the coffee table, maybe you need to take the coffee table out and put in a craft table instead. You use the room how you like it, and let it be on wheels so that it can roll away. And if company comes, you can pull a coffee table back in. But I think this is an area where you're using the room most of the time to do craft in, and so making the supplies and the furniture work for that will make your life easier. It just needs to be portable since it's basically a dual use room. When people are there, it's the living room. And when people aren't there, then it's your craft room. And so making those things sort of interchangeable so you can set up the room one way or the other, depending on when people are there, would be helpful.
Deborah says, I would love a craft room. I know exactly how I would organize it, just like I would know exactly how I would use lottery winnings. And she goes on to say that in her tiny apartment, she has one bedroom and one kitchen, no living room, and her craft is soap making.
Oh,
She
cool.
does soap, and that essentially her entire apartment is dedicated to it. So she more or less lives in a craft room.
Right. Well, and soap making is it requires water, right? Like it's you got to have water to do your thing. So that means that you have to be near the kitchen sink anyway. So it's okay. So you're soap making instead of cooking a lot. So maybe some of the kitchen. Well, and it sounds like some of the kitchen's already dedicated to it. That's funny.
Yeah, she mentioned she has a half small fridge full of oils, an armoire with essential oils, 3 bins that hold molds and pots, and shelf stable oils and lye are in my bedside table in a bin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. That's okay, man. You're making use of your space to store what you love to do. So good for you. Good for you supporting being crafty. I know. Is this Deborah that teaches, Deborah?
Yes.
Yeah, see, you need a break. You need to be able to come home from school and have a break and do something else for a little while to recover from teaching all day. So good for you that you're making that happen.
Dawn said, somebody I heard a long time ago has the phrase, let the store it for you.
Yes, because they have way more room and you might as well not have 57 options when you can go and get another one another day or order it. And if you have to wait for a minute to do what you want to do, it'll be okay. And if you get frustrated and want to use what you have, then it just means that you're being more creative with what you've got. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe you don't have the exact right thing, but you can find something that will work and make use of your creativity to make it work.
Kathleen says there's a company that makes a table that rolls and holds supplies. Craft and Go. Craft with just an N.
Yeah.
Go. Are you familiar with that one at all?
No, I haven't heard of that one. That's good.
Oh, craftandgo.com. She shared is craftngo.com.
Awesome. That helps when you don't have a dedicated room, when you don't have enough space to have a dedicated room. But you can go and park something somewhere or like roll it behind the couch when you're not working on it or whatever.
Well, and Samudra said coffee table crafts investigate ottomans that open to store stuff and then the top flips over with a tray on one side, cushions or something on the other.
Right.
The only trouble with that might be the height of it. But then I guess the height of your coffee table is not great either.
It may not be really high either. Exactly.
It may be, well, I imagine to work on the coffee table, you're either sitting on the floor or you're holding materials on the coffee table and then bringing them onto your lap, on a tray or lap desk or something to do the actual work. Connie didn't mention what the craft is that she does.
If you work on a tray, as people have suggested already, then you can lift that ottoman lid, put the tray in it and close it, and then it's disappeared for company. The cats can't get into it, yada, yada, yada. And you don't have to do a lot of cleaning up. You just have to stash what you're working on. And so I wouldn't keep anything else in the ottoman so that it can be dedicated to the crafting, but that's a way for sure to get one to get a space to hide it where you work it so you can clean it up in a hurry. So that's a good idea.
I want to remind everybody that we're meeting next week, Tuesday, June 22nd, same time, noon US Central Time. We're going to do some more digging down into psychological roots of clutter. We constantly make judgments about worth, assessing and assigning value to our lives and our stuff, but our notions of perceived value can clash with the reality of our physical surroundings. In next week's webcast, we'll examine value-based emotional responses and habits of thought that sabotage our ability to get or stay organized. We're calling next week's show, For What It's Worth, Assessing Value in the Struggle Against Clutter. Okay, I think we'd better get to our weekly tittle.
Okay, so this week is called Glitter and Glue and Buttons and Beads. In keeping with today's art and craft room theme, this week's assignment is to examine and evaluate a subset of your creative stash. We'd like you to revisit your craft space, your equipment or supplies, and then apply one or all of these filters to reduce
The volume.
the volume.
Sorry,
Yeah. So the first question is, are there materials that have been stored or buried for a long time? Those are ripe for finding possibilities to let go of. So bring them out into the light of day and consider whether they still inspire you creatively. Do you have supplies that you used at the start of your craft when you were still learning that are no longer appropriate to your skill or interest level? That's a good way to filter. Is there a category of material or medium that's grown out of proportion to how much you use it? And by this, I mean, people start deciding they need to keep, I'm going to keep egg cartons, or I'm going to keep this plastic tray. I'm going to keep the tubes and the toilet paper because I'm going to use them. And then they just put that collecting impulse on automatic, and they keep adding and adding and adding and adding. And they are in no way burning it off as fast as they collect it. So if you have over collected something, this is the time to go and say, okay, I have 500 of these, but I'm only ever going to actually use 5 of them. So I probably need to let all of the rest go to somebody else. This is a way to filter out and make room where you've sort of put yourself on autopilot and not realize that you're not using it as fast as you are adding it in. Last question to ask is there a supply or a tool of which you have a lot of duplicates? And so you can morph all these collections. If you're not a crafter or an artist, you can still apply them to any collection or large stash of items in your space and ask your version of those same questions and see if you can filter out a small part of your studio and find some clean space that you didn't know could be hacked. You can, if you're already overstuffed anyway, now these are places that are good places to start in terms of filtering out.
Here's one more useful tip. This comes from Elaine on Facebook.
Okay.
Elaine says, as a quilter in a small house, I'm forced to keep supplies and fabrics to a minimum. That was a problem for years until I asked a local quilt shop / assistance store if they wanted my extras. To my surprise, they were delighted to take and resell my fabrics and patterns. Win-win. Don't be afraid to ask.
Wow, that's amazing. And quilting is quilters collect material like I collect beads, but beads take up a lot less space than fabric. Fabric is dense and heavy and bulky, and it's like having a million pieces of linen in your house, and it's super hard to store that material. And so if you found a way to get it out of the house, awesome. Very, very good. I'm proud.
Okay, if
That's
you're
great.
watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so please keep those questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere that you find us. And you can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks, everybody. I do want to say thank you to all the people that responded about our request for thoughts on the Marie Kondo KonMari method. I've gotten a whole bunch of emails about that, and so I'm in communication with those people back. We're going to massage that topic and figure out how we want to interact with you about it, and we'll be back with you. Thanks so much for helping us develop this topic, and we will be back next week. Can't wait to see you. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.